Our next speaker is the collected manifestation of every exasperated sigh uttered when he enters the room. This gives him some benefits. He's able to slip into parties he's not invited to, which is all of them. And he's also able to slip into the exciting meetings of Parliament, which is none of them. But it does make him deathly afraid of ceiling fans. He is Ben Hughes.
Thanks. It's great to be back. How are we all doing? How was the break? There's going to be lots of frustrating audience participation. So it's like 6 people on stage. No, not really. We're here to talk about the exciting world of Sec DevOps. First off, who's this clown? You may have seen me talk earlier. If you got up in time to see the keynote, thank you, Chris and Adrian. I'm an infrastructure security engineer at Etsy. Before that, I was at Puppet Labs, not Puppet, because that's when it was. I've worked at some failing startups. I've worked at some that have a chance of succeeding. I own a lot of black t-shirts because I work in security. Etsy, you may have heard of Etsy. They are a fine purveyor of adorable pictures of small dogs with crowns. We have offices all over the place. We have some people in Portland and Oregon. Black Friday, which is a concept I don't really understand, is coming up, so please go and buy some things. We have lots of things, selling them and stuff. You can get an amazing gem and the hologram earrings, which were made in Portland, Oregon. So DevSecOps, it's a ridiculous name. I don't know at what point we're going to stop just putting 3-letter beginning of departments onto each other. I didn't name it. I'm going to blame Gareth Rushgrave at Puppet because he probably named it and probably has a talk about it, as he has a talk about most things. So DevOps, why is it always DevOps? Why did they go in alphabetical order there? You've probably heard that term a few times today, but I have always summed it up as it's the radical notion that you should talk to and work with the people you work with. I don't get how this is still a radical notion, but hey, there's a conference for it. That's good. Yeah, if you ask me, it's this is a good joke. You'll enjoy it. It's like, what does Fight Club and DevOps have in common? One is a violent, ugly tale of men often trying to find their own identity and path in life, and the other is a Chuck Palahniuk book. So, yeah, it's a little bit of a club, but whatever. So there's these security people. You may have heard of them. You may be avoiding them. They may tell you to stop downloading things on your laptop. But past a certain size, your organization will either have them or you'll probably be in trouble with the IRS or someone. Or you'll be a Bitcoin exchange and now have no money. Is there anyone here from a Bitcoin exchange? Correct. So you saw this slide yesterday. Dear Mr. Pete Cheslock over at ThreatStack has got a lot of mileage out of this one because it's a great image. It combines unicorns, DevOps, and rainbows, and shoveling shit, which appears to be my job now. That wasn't in the contract. So that's often regarded as the view of how you DevOps people come and ruin my world. Don't know why I don't have any hair in there, and not sure that's a very big unicorn, so may not be fully accurate. Developers, as we talked about this morning, they traditionally want to move fast and break things. In San Francisco, which is where I'm based, there's now a Mark Zuckerberg hospital where I hope they don't move fast and break things. Because that's a terrible idea for a hospital to do. Also note that Mark Zuckerberg is actually a very tiny person, as is shown by him standing in front of this postcard. I could have done with some sleep. Operations people, they want stability, and as is pointed out by this, it's very hard to find a useful image for stability. They don't want the latest version of MongoDB running. Many of them don't want a version of MongoDB running. Security, we look like this because padlocks mean it's safe. If you've ever been to a website that has a padlock on it, there's absolutely no way that isn't encrypted. Like, who thought that was a good idea? So security is traditionally seen as a blocker. I've certainly said no a fair number of times in my life to people with their ridiculous developer suggestions. But that doesn't particularly help organizations grow. This famous quote from John Gilmore that the internet, not the net, that was a terrible film. The internet interprets censorship as damage and routes around it. So the same thing happens with security in organizations. If security blocks something, people will find a way to go around it. Like anyone who's run a web service on port 81 so that they don't have to worry about firewalls on port 80. Anyone who's tunneled through a web proxy to get outbound access. I've never done that in my life. And that's because the restrictions that seemed reasonable, you didn't agree with them being reasonable. And a security team that is left out of process or ignored is worse than having no security team at all, because you're paying people not enough money, because I desperately need more, but you're wasting a lot of money on a security team who aren't actually doing any securitying. So you want to include them, sadly. That's great, Ben. What does this have to do with DevOps? I'm glad you asked. I'm really glad you asked, Alice. As we were talking about earlier today, I said earlier twice in a sentence. I was much more prepared this morning. You should add security in early, because the later you add them in, the less impact they can have. If someone rocks up and goes, hey, can you sprinkle a security on this? You'd be like, I have some other suggestions for what you could do. Because it's not the place where security needs to be built in. How early? I mean, everyone always wants to be at the first meeting until they have too many meetings. Hindsight is always 20/20 of, well, if only you had told me this 6 months ago. Yeah, but you were busy with a different fire 6 months ago. So this leads to the tough thing of, how do you scale a security team? Because you can't have, in like a 1,000-person company or however big we are this week, you can't have a security person in every meeting, nor would you want a security person in every meeting. So you have to find another way of scaling it. There's this random made-up numbers which are proved by maths with an S, that in most engineering organizations you have like 10 developers to 1 operations person. So let's say that's reasonable. As that scales up, you get like 100 developers, as if you can imagine anything worse. 10 operations people, which is a lot of whiskey, and then one security person who has to deal with 110 people making terrible life decisions. And themselves making worse life decisions. And making up numbers on stage. So this is why big teams fail, and it's about how communication doesn't scale linearly, that's hard to say, and also how you draw cool little shapes. And from that you can see if you have a small company, as many of you who've enjoyed failing startups can attest, communication is fine when there's 10 of you. Once there's 100 of you, you don't have the same communication. So how do you do this with regard to your security team and scaling them out? One of the things we've done is have the interestingly named security champions. Those are people on various teams in Etsy who have spent some time with us. I'll get more into that later. And are kind of person on the inside of those teams. They're not like a spy. That's just a bit weird. But they are useful for two-way dialogue between us and those teams. We do a thing called boot camps. Does anyone else do boot camps? I don't know the size of your company, which is the super baffling thing of when you start at Etsy, your first few weeks are not spent with your team, which at the time seems crazy because you've just started a new job to not work with your team, and you're like, well, this makes no sense. You people are idiots. But you go around a bunch of different teams. Like I think I was on our dev tools team, then our operations team, and probably another team. It feels like so long ago. And you are embedded in that team and you learn all about them. And this is really good because it sets you up to make connections with other teams from the very beginning of your career at Etsy or wherever you work. Come work at Etsy. So that way that you have these long relationships and all these teams aren't seen alien to you. because you got to know them before you got to know everyone else. Yep. I forgot to advance the slides as I spoke. It makes security approachable from the start. I'm sure you've all worked with the security teams who are not approachable. You don't have to name names or point fingers. I'm right here. But I've certainly spoken to organizations where they've said, yeah, we don't really get on with our security team. And you're like, cool, that doesn't sound very useful. And it's quite unfortunate, and it leads to kind of dividing companies up. The same thing that happened with developers and operations that has definitely been fixed by these conferences. Too subtle. I'm a subtle person, as you can tell. They take back what they've learned from us, and they also bring new skills into us, because none of us can do front-end dev for toffee, because like it's all tables to us and like marquee flags. CSS is not a thing that exists in the security world because it's been made within the last 15 years. If you've ever used a security product from a vendor, you will probably recognize that. And we've had people from like data science, so we did a Hadoop once, and all those other good teams that come and join with us. Once we have our champions, we get them to hang out in Slack or IRC, probably not HipChat because it's down. Sorry, Puppet people. Atlassian aren't a sponsor. I've done it again, haven't I? I've already upset a vendor. And we've taken them to conferences, so we've brought people who've been in other parts of the organization to DefCon with us last summer, this summer, and the summer before, and that's enabled them to go and see amazing talks and get really excited about security, and then terrified about security, because some of those talks are quite terrifying. And we also, when we have in-house events, for our Coders Craft events, we generally try and get them all to come along. We had the wonderful, I'm never going to pronounce her last name, we had the wonderful Sophia from Trail of Bits come in and talk about modern application security in iOS, and she knows a lot about iOS internals, and that was very, very exciting. So it just gets people energized and interested in security without having to do security training, which no one enjoys. Has anyone had a really good time at their mandatory security training? Oh, it's a half. I mean, that's quite a lot. You have a nice security team, though. Like New Relic have a lovely security team. Also, we have a thing called senior rotations, which is just an excuse to have an amazing picture of a man having the time of his life. Probably for the last time in his life. Oh. So what they are is, they're like our initial boot camps, but they're after you've been at the company for, say, a year or so. Any point after that, once you're senior, I wouldn't say quite, you have to be there that long, but you go and spend like 4 to 6 weeks working with a team, and you get to do more in-depth things. You get bigger projects, you get to bring your skill set to the team, and you become really embedded in our team. We recently had someone come to our team from the data science team, and they built a whole classification system for fraud detection in AWS in it, and then like we could never do that because, I mean, AWS is beyond us, frankly. It's like typing and stuff. And data science requires like an education rather than just typing on computers and hanging out in bars, which is the classic security education. So that was a really useful thing for us, and I think they got a lot from it too. This way, people go back with much more in-depth knowledge of being in the security team rather than just like a week. And all of our senior rotations have gone really well. And we have them throughout the rest of the organization. We've had them go from security into other departments for similar things. By security law, you have to have a slide with hackers on it. Otherwise, you get kicked out of the club. What a great bad film. This is stolen from our ops siblings of designated ops people. So that the idea there is you have a designated, not dedicated, and the number of times I get those run the wrong way, it's really good. And they are the first point of contact for your team. For like us, we have designated hackers who will go to the meetings of those teams, will go hang out in the IRC channel, will, if they have a security question, they will be the first person they speak to, and then if they don't know the answer, then they can share it with our security team, rather than them having to find a new person every time to ask security questions to. So it just streamlines the communication channels between all these different departments, and it means that they know they have someone on hand to get answers from, or to go, hey, so this thing, what's this, if they need it. And it's flexible. Not everyone goes to the meetings. Some people are just in the mailing lists and what have you. It's designed to be low impact, because no one wants more meetings. I'm convinced every company has too many meetings, but no one yet has fixed that. So someone should fix that. Same to you, Alice. Why do all this? This is certainly not free. There is overhead in it. It is time-consuming, it is expensive, there's context switching, all those good things. But the reason we do this is for things like this. You can't have 1,000 security people in an organization of 1,000 people unless you integrate security into everything they do. Having someone go, hey, I just saw this weird thing, is way more valuable and a much better return of investment than like spending a few $100,000 on vendor hardware. Like no IDS will go, I just saw this weird thing. It'll go, here's a false positive, enjoy. And the idea is outreach. Everyone in your organization now works on security, which is a really good way to make it scale by everyone being on security. And if you have one of those old style security teams that's like not approachable, you have situations like this where should I run this? Should I tell security about this? No, last time I spoke to them, they were really mean and told me not to bother them again because they're far too important. Which is true, but not the case. Which leads on nicely to the thing the security industry really needs to get a handle on. So if there are any security people in the room, I would say get some of that. If you can buy that from a vendor, great. If not, you certainly won't get it going to DefCon. They think security people generally think they're smarter than other people, but they're not very good at making security products or interfaces or being polite human beings, which are all quite challenging things in our industry. So our director of security, Rich Smith, recently, well not that recently, had this slide in one of his talks. I think it was at KiwiCon, so I've toned the language down so it's more acceptable. But like having bad people's probably a bit harsh. Having bottom hole type of people on your security team is doing you a disservice and is making your team actually less efficient. The amazingly talented but doesn't work well with other person, you don't want them in your dev groups, you don't want them in your ops groups, you certainly don't want them in your security groups. It's just a shame that there's quite a few of them. At Etsy we have a thing about blameless postmortems, so we try not to, if something breaks, it's not your fault, it's just that everything is terrible, and then we try and learn about it so that we can make it better. And blaming people for things won't make them stop doing it. They will literally just stop telling you. So if you shout at someone like, why do you keep doing this thing? They're like, cool, I'll just hide it better. I will now use encryption in my torrent client. Cool story. You can tell people not to open random files they get in emails, but if you have a recruiting team, that's basically their job. So, like, yeah, if you don't know who it's from, don't open it. But I don't know who it's from until I read their resume, which they've sent me as a PDF. Yeah, don't open it. What? This is a really cool bit of malware I found, and for anyone who does UX, you'll enjoy this. This is actually a UX exploit. There's no like mad 0 day in this. It's just we've all been taught that like this happens every release of Office because Office breaks everything with every release. So you're conditioned to going, huh, that seems reasonable. And as soon as you do the thing it says at the top of the document, a very exciting macro runs and launches an executable. But I don't think that's the user's fault. I think security and definitely the industry has made bad tools. And that isn't the fault of the users because they're just trying to consume them to do their job. But the reason that exploit works is we've had so many versions of Office where the only way to get it to work is to click on enough boxes till it goes away. Like before SSL certificates were cheap, you would just go, yeah, go away SSL warning. And now because they're cheap and work and Let's Encrypt exists, you're like, yeah, I won't randomly click through this. This might be bad. So this is the audience participation time. Everyone get real excited. Which of these would you rather? Have 95% of your organization not fall for phishing at all, or 10% of the people that do tell you that they did? If you picked A, you are wrong. Because I work in security, so can be opinionated. Ha, DevOps, I ask you. So a big part of this comes down to making security the default. If you make security hard, people won't do it. I have a wonderful example of this. Who knows what this is? I'm sorry. Who knows what this is? Yeah. WhatsApp just made all their instant messaging end-to-end encrypted. The user doesn't have to do anything. It's on by default. It's completely transparent. If you want to go and twiddle with the settings and check fingerprints, you can, but don't. If you compare WhatsApp usage to GPG, I'm willing to bet that there are a few more people using WhatsApp than there are using GPG. And GPG's been around since the 90s, so it should have a very big user base, right? No, it's because GPG is a tire fire designed in the 1800s, and WhatsApp has a UI and UX team, and it just works. You don't have to go like, oh, do I have to armor this? No, it just works. So, conclusion time. You get lunch, and even better, you get a Jennifer, which is nearly as good as lunch, but will be more interesting than lunch. Security people need to be approachable, transparent, humble, tall, attractive. No. They need to stop blaming their users, and you need to get people to come and work with you. The same things that Dev and Ops went through whenever they started going through it, or haven't yet, you need to do that in security. It's just security seem to be bigger assholes than Ops people. Case in point. The rest of the organization needs to stop being afraid of a security team or get rid of them if they are afraid of them because they're not being helpful. The big, bad, scary security teams are not super useful for most places. I'm sure, like in the military, that's probably a good thing. I'm never going to be in the military, so get everyone into your everyone to be part of your security team so it scales, and put security in by default and early. And now it's a controversial last slide. DevOps isn't a real thing, and I've been saying this about DevOps for a long time, that you should just talk to all your coworkers and include them as if that you work for the same company for the same goals, rather than you're these small teams fighting each other. And then you'll hug it out. Boom. Thank you very much.
Deathly afraid.
As they were being sent to the furnace to be disposed of as medical waste,